Shortly before I graduated from the University of Georgia with my master's degree, my neurologist told me it was unlikely I would ever be able to manage a full-time job. You see, I am one of the 37 million Americans with migraine disease. Migraine is a chronic illness that affects 18% of women and 7% of men in the United States. A common refrain among those of us with the illness is migraine is not just a headache. Migraine is a neurological disease characterized by attacks that can affect your entire body, from your gut to your brain to your tingling feet. Many of us experience hypersensitivity to light, sound, and smell. Dramatic changes in mood and vision are common. When I was in graduate school, my diagnosis had changed from episodic migraine to chronic migraine, meaning I had 15 or more days each month affected by migraine disease. My hypersensitivity to light meant that I would often don a hat and sunglasses to avoid the classroom fluorescence. My grad school advisor would peek into my assistantship office, really a glorified closet, and joke that I was in my bat cave. You see, I worked in this tiny room with all the lights off, the computer screen set as dimly as it would go while still being legible. While I had become more accepting of my illness, I wasn't comfortable talking about it with loved ones. Yeah, they knew that I had frequent migraines, but they didn't know how debilitating the condition had become. I worried about my parents worrying. I didn't want my sister to experience any anxiety because of my illness. My friends were and are incredibly thoughtful, but I got tired of talking about migraine. Would they get tired of hearing about it? Would they still invite me to things if they thought that I'd always have to bail at the last minute? Did they believe me? So I did what any self-respecting 20-something would do in those heady days of the early 2000s. I started a blog. I had no designs on becoming an internationally known migraine health advocate. I had created the blog as an outlet for me to talk about my struggles with migraine. I didn't advertise it, and I didn't actively seek a readership. I would simply post a few times a month whenever something migraine-related started nagging at me, and I wanted to vent or cry or simply shake my fist in the air and think about how unfair it all was. I told a couple of friends about my blog, but I kept it anonymous apart from that. Something unexpected happened. I started getting comments. Readers were out there, and they began sharing their experiences with me. Experiences like these. I thought I was the only one. My husband rolls his eyes when I tell him that I can't get out of bed without vomiting. He doesn't believe me. I'm afraid my friends will stop inviting me to things too. I missed my sister's wedding because I was stuck in the hotel room with a migraine. Wait a minute. There were other people out there with stories like mine? This was news to me. There were other people out there whose lives had been affected by migraine, and they felt validated by the stories I shared. Without intending to, I had created what was, back in 2005, a rare online haven for people with migraine, a place where people could, anonymously or not, truly express themselves about how much migraine had screwed up their lives. For years, I didn't reveal any identifying information about myself. Again, I told a couple friends about the blog, but I had no interest in putting my name out there. However, something happened in 2008 that made me step out of the migraine closet, so to speak. The New York Times created a list of recommended reading for people with migraine. The Migraine Girl was on that New York Times list. I finally told my mom. After years of writing on the blog, I felt fulfilled in that aspect of my life, but it wasn't a paying job. I hadn't found a job yet that I really found fulfilling. On top of everything else, I wasn't sure I could even have a full-time job. My neurologist's voice echoed in my head. It is unlikely you will ever manage a full-time job. He had uttered those words with a disturbing air of nonchalance, but what I had heard was a devastating dead end. How can someone who has migraine so many days a week actually find a career that's meaningful? To my surprise, the answer had been there all along. Books. I wanted to work with books every day. I come from a family of readers, and like many bibliophiles, I had thought often about how dreamy it would be to work in a bookstore. Better yet, what would it be like to own one? I wasn't sure I would ever find out the answer to that question. I wasn't even sure I could stand on my own. How can someone with chronic illness that makes her sick half of the month even manage an independent bookstore? How can an independent business, a lean startup, hit the ground running when its founder is stuck at home in bed with extreme head pain and nausea, all because a migraine was triggered by some guy on an elevator wearing entirely too much cologne? At that point, the world felt like a minefield to me. I controlled what migraine triggers I could, but I nearly panicked when I encountered a trigger that I couldn't ignore, that I couldn't avoid. For instance, a thunderstorm. Something magical happened, though. No one has ever discovered a cure for migraine. However, I discovered that despite all my medical challenges, I still wanted this. Despite all the hurdles that were set in my way, I still wanted to open this bookstore, and I was ready to take on the challenge. For the first time, I had discovered a career path that inspired me, a job that even in its infancy gave me an opportunity to give back to my community while also providing me with meaningful work. During the long process of opening my bookstore, Avid Bookshop, I openly shared with people about my struggles. This got people invested in the story of the bookshop in a really genuine way. I kept people updated about my progress, or lack thereof. Instead of hiding my setbacks, I shared them with people on social media and in personal conversations. I attended bookseller conferences, much to the confusion of some people who didn't understand why someone who didn't even work in a bookstore, let alone have any retail experience, would be there. I stopped being shy about what I didn't know, and I started asking for advice. I told the core group of enthusiastic readers who were following my journey that I was still determined to open Avid Bookshop, but that my health and a terrible 2008 economy had gotten in my way. I was still set on opening this store. At some point, I really bucked up. The more I shared, the more bold I became. I stopped dragging my feet about setting up meetings with lenders to talk about some atypical funding ideas. I enrolled in business classes. I finally tackled the most overwhelming task of all, which is finishing the business plan and the corresponding financial projections. Somewhere along the way, I realized that hundreds of people were really genuinely invested in Avid's success. I was so amazed by this, and it made me want to keep going. At first, I thought this would be insurmountable, but then I decided to do something that was profoundly uncomfortable for me. After a lifetime of insisting that I could do it myself, that I didn't need any help, thank you very much, I started to ask people the question, can you help? And help they did. People filled out surveys, they donated books for my pop-up sales, and they bought photographs at an art show that I staged in order to raise funds for a website. In summer 2011, when I finally had a retail space on Prince Avenue and some bank funding, Avid readers showed up in droves to paint, dust, put together shelving. To say that Avid Bookshop really is this community's bookstore is the genuine truth, not some catchy marketing line. All along the way, I have been candid with my coworkers about my struggles with chronic illness. They see me on days when I am bubbly, enthusiastic, brimming with ambition and passion. They also see me on days when I'm exhausted, when I feel like the room is spinning. And on those days, they gently encourage me to go home, to rest. They assure me that they have things under control. They had set up a way for the avid world to keep spinning, even if a migraine had me waylaid for days. I believe that my being open with my coworkers allows them to be open with each other and with the people in their lives. It also makes Avid a place where people can be their authentic selves without fear of judgment. I can imagine business leaders being very put off by this approach. Shouldn't a leader be strong, formidable, never showing any signs of weakness? Well, that's not the Avid way, though it may work for several other companies. Avid was founded on radical candor. It seems like our unorthodox approach is working. We garnered so much community support that we were able to open a second bookshop in 2016. This little bookshop that could now employs more than 20 people. Choosing an openness and vulnerability is never easy for me. I work hard at it every day, but I can say without a doubt that it has transformed my world. By sharing openly with the community about the struggles and the joys we have in running Avid Bookshop, people feel genuinely invested in our journey. By writing as the migraine girl, I can give voice and validation to people who don't feel ready to speak up just yet. Fellow entrepreneurs tell me that my candid sharing about some of the reservations and worries I have about running a business that's sustainable really make them feel a little less crazy, a little less isolated. Being open and candid has been supremely difficult for me, but I can tell you that this approach has led to some of the most significant events of my professional life. Being vulnerable allows me to meaningfully connect with my communities, and having those communities support allows me to continue sharing in an authentic and often powerful way. Maybe chronic illness isn't what's holding you back. Maybe there's something else that's sparking some anxiety for you. I'm here to tell you that you aren't serving yourself or anyone around you if you're not taking risks and practicing vulnerability. It's not easy to be vulnerable. It takes strength to begin revealing your authentic self. But we're here to support you. We are your community. We can't wait to see what you've become. Thank you.